Welcome back to our editions where we're covering the pre-Super Bowl NFL championship games. We're at the 1945 season, and there are some great changes, some parity maybe in the league, but some different teams indeed. Coming up in just a moment is our guest historian to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, DarIn Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is DarIn Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another championship day. We are talking about the 1945 season, and boy, we've got a special guest here today to talk about the team and the season of the championship of 1945, right smack at the end of World War II. Joe Squires is our guest today from Gridiron Greats magazine and the Gridiron Greats podcast. Joe, welcome to the Pig Pen.
Hey, great to be on. I love your preamble. That's very energetic, DarIn. Well done.
Oh, thank you. But after 1,300 sometimes, you get to be pretty good at it, you know?
Do you have that memorized, or do you have a cue card above your monitor? I couldn't
No,
tell.
it's all memorized. Quite often it's stuttering. Today wasn't such a bad display. Came off the tongue.
You nailed it.
Well, thank you. Speaking about nailing it, you and Bob Swick have such a great podcast on Gridiron Greats where you get to talk about football history through the trading cards and collectibles. And it's just so interesting because they're so connected to the history of the game.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the podcast and what you do in your football fandom.
Oh, I say it and I repeat it often. I have the best seat in the house. I get to talk hobby with hobby giant Bob Swick, a couple times, every other week, and it is amazing. Just like you and I, we're catching up before the show. I mean, I don't know how many times Bob and I have logged in to do the show and just sat there and talked hobby for 10, 15 minutes. The text threads that we have back and forth are amazing with friends just sharing hobby. Yeah, I've got the best seat in the house. I get to talk, like I said, talk football with a hobby giant, Bob Swick, the captain. We call him the captain.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had Bob on 9 episodes ago. He did the 36 Green Bay season, and we've got some great reviews about that. So folks, you can go back and check that out.
That's a stunner that he took the Packers.
Yeah, it was a stunner. It was by invite, though. I helped him along the way, though. I knew his passion, so push the right buttons for him.
Good.
Now, we have you going a little bit outside because you are a fan of the Seattle Seahawks, and you, like I, a fan of the Steelers. We don't have much to talk about in pre-Super Bowl at all.
That 2005 Super Bowl, I'm not a fan of.
Well, I'm kind of excited about that still, but that's okay. But as a Steelers fan, I didn't have anything to talk about for these things, so I can't be any expert on it. But we found a team that in a season that really needed somebody to speak for it because it's such an interesting story. And that's the 1945 season, and the team eventually won that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the 45 season and who won it?
Yeah. As we were talking before, the 1945 Cleveland Rams, I'm very familiar with that. NFL, the NFL and the Cleveland Browns coming up. Before I showed you the uncut sheet of the Sears 1946 AAFC, Cleveland Browns, and so I was very aware of the Cleveland Browns displacing the Cleveland Rams. And they moved to LA. And I'm a big fan of Bob Waterfield and Elroy Hirsch and Tom Fears. What I didn't know as I was doing research for this is that the Rams drafted Fears and Hirsch both in the 1945 draft in January of 45, and both of them chose not to turn pro that time. And despite that, the Rams won the championship that year. That was stunning to me. I had to go back and look at the dates and wait a minute, why weren't they on the roster? Which I didn't know. It's fascinating. Elroy Hirsch was drafted first round, number 5 selection as an end out of Michigan. and decided to go into the AAFC instead. So he spent 4 years in the AAFC and joined the Rams in 1949. Tom Fears was drafted in the 11th round, number 103 overall, out of UCLA, and he decided to go back to UCLA for a couple more years. And he ended up joining the Rams team in 1948. So, I mean, the Rams won the championship. They went 9-1 and then beat the Redskins. But imagine that team stacked with a little bit more talent of two future Hall of Famers, Elroy Hirsch and Tom Fears. That was one little tidbit I walked away from, is I had no idea they drafted those two future Hall of Famers that year, and they both did other things.
Yeah, I didn't realize they drafted them that year, same year either. So that's a pretty good draft, even though they didn't get to enjoy it for a few years.
Yeah, it was very stacked. Yeah, Elroy Hirsch, as I was reading about it, because you go down these rabbit holes, as we all do as hobbyists, where it's like, ended up becoming one of the highest paid, NFL players when he ended up coming back to the Rams. But really cool. I mean, do deep dives on some of these topics. Like, I didn't know the Rams had that good of a record. One of the things I really walked away from is the stadium that they played their games at. The Rams played at League Park, which is in Cleveland, but it's a baseball field. It's an old baseball field built like in 1900. So it wasn't in the best of shape. And the capacity of the stadium varies because they eventually fled Cleveland because, the Cleveland Browns, the AFC, were starting up, and they, the owner Reeves knew that they wouldn't be able to compete. And they never made money. Like the previous 4 or 5 years, the Cleveland Rams never made money. Even in their championship run, they lost money. So those two things forced them to move to LA. And I'm like, well, how big? What park did they play at? They played at League Park. They had 4 home games out of they had their first week bye, so they had 10 games, and 4 of them were home games, which isn't a very good split.
Right.
The season opener, 10,800 people came to the season opener out of a capacity of 22,000. So you can imagine the stands look a little barren. The next game against the Bears, 19,580, so kind of sold out. But then they had 2 away games. To the Eagles in October, 38,000 people went to Scheid Park. And then a week later at the Giants Polo Grounds, 46,000 people showed up. In the 4 home games that year, they had a total attendance of 77,000 people, but 1/3 of those came in week 8 against the Packers. Bob Swick will be happy to hear that. 28,000, or 1/3 of their attendance came against the Packers. So people came to see the Packers, an established team. That year, Don Hudson was on the team. I mean, it was a good stacked talent team.
Right.
You can just look at this and go, attendance is abysmal. Yeah, I mean, it's the stands are 75% full for most of their games, and then they go away. They go, to New York. The game with the Eagles and the Giants had a total attendance of 84,000. Those 2 games were like 30% more than the entire attendance to all 4 games, at home. So why did they leave? Why did they go to LA? It was 2-pronged. They lost money, and they were being forced out. The championship game, December 16th, 1945, as you mentioned, right on the heels of the war ending in August. So a lot of players, on both teams leaving to go play, go into military service, coming back. I mean, we were talking about Tim Brown's new book coming out, and I almost divulged something I should have, but the attendance to the championship game, which was held at Cleveland Municipal Stadium. So I went down a rabbit hole. How big is Cleveland Municipal Stadium? 78,000 capacity. It was built for the Cleveland Indians in 1931, but the Rams were not allowed to play there. They played in a 60-year-old park, 55-year-old park with a 22,000 seat capacity.
And
Uh,
I live 100 miles from Cleveland, and in the 70s, the Browns still played in Cleveland Municipal,
yeah.
and it was it was a real treat. I would go there as a Steelers
Yeah.
fan, of course, and when you go up into the sixth level, it was like you were climbing a ladder. That's how these
Oh,
seats were
wow.
built. I mean, it was like straight up, and I was like a 12-year-old kid, so the steps were probably 4 inches wide, and you're
Oh,
climbing up there, and they
wow.
had these giant columns. So if you watched a baseball game or a football game there, and it would take out, 10, 15 yards of the field because these things were big cement columns holding the structure up. So yeah, it was quite a behemoth, and it was probably, state of the art when it was first built in the early 20th century. But
Yeah.
yeah, but big stadium though.
Yeah. 1931. It was built for the Cleveland Indians, but I really got into the timing of when this stuff happens. So the Rams are playing in League Park, 22,000, 55-year-old stadium. And then the Cleveland Browns come along in this upstart AAFC, and they get to play at Cleveland Municipal. So kind of a weird slap in the face where it's like this established team that has been there doesn't get to play in the nice new shiny stadium, but the upstart team does. I don't, who knows how that happened.
Well, I've got an inkling to that.
Yes, so
Well,
do I. Yeah.
well, Paul Brown's probably the reason for that because he was a high school coach at Massillon, which is right down the road from Cleveland.
Mm.
They ended up winning a national championship in high school, won the national championship at Ohio State, and then what he did with the Browns is phenomenal. But I mean, how
Absolutely.
many people have won as a head coach 4 national championships or three national championships at each level of football? That's unbelievable. And
I
in two
didn't know that.
leagues,
I didn't
two
know that
professional.
about him in the high school league. Yeah. That's interesting. My son and I were just getting into the conversation. If Patrick Mahomes wins his Super Bowl and has 4 rings, will he be the second best quarterback ever to lace him up behind Tom Brady? Then I'm like, well, have you heard of Joe Montana? He went 4 for 4. What about Otto Graham? What about Bart Starr, Johnny United? And I always go back. And he's
Hmm.
like, nobody cares about Otto Graham. Really? I care about Otto Graham. I think he's
They,
one of the greatest to ever lace him up.
yeah, they should because he was phenomenal.
AFC championships, and then when they joined the NFL, they made short work of the NFL and won the championship. So I don't know, but so interesting. I love that you've been to the municipal stadium. So what's the nickname for it? Do you just call it the Muni or?
I'm not sure what they called it. I think it was just Cleveland Municipal is what we call it. I mean, I'm in Erie. I'm in Pennsylvania, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
but and I wasn't a Guard or a Indians fan or a Browns fan, but I would go to games there if they, like we went and saw the Yankees play the Indians one time, just because
oh,
the '77 Yankees were they were the bomb. They were the World Series champions, so we went and
yeah.
watched them. So
Of course. Yeah.
yeah.
So you can see, and Paul Brown, obviously the reason that, first year, the Cleveland Browns in the AFC get to play in this, beautiful stadium, a capacity of 78,000. To add insult to injury, League Park became the practice field for the Browns after the Rams left.
Oh, no
So
kidding.
what was their prime stadium became, the practice field. Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So -8 degrees, December 16th, 1945, the temperature was -8 degrees. That's 22 Celsius for you, metric listeners. Game attendance was 32,000. I mean, even the championship game was 32,000. The 2 away games that the Rams had, like I mentioned, the Eagles was 38,000 and the Giants, at Polo Grounds was 46,000. So even
Hmm.
winning the NFL championship didn't draw a crowd. I mean, it's by far their biggest game. As I mentioned, the Packers on November 11th drew 28,000. And since the capacity of League Park was 22, I'm assuming they put, bleachers or, in the end zone, around, or, who knows, but they packed them
Right.
in the Packer game. So good game. Cleveland Rams against the Redskins, the Washington Redskins at the time. Sammy Baugh, number 33, lacing him up for the Redskins. As I knew what the score was, and sometimes when you see a score of 15, in the old days, you're like, oh, well, they had some weird pointing systems. Kicking the extra point wasn't automatic, etc. What I didn't know is the first score of the game was a safety. Sammy Baugh dropped back into the end zone. They're on like the 3-4 yard line. Sammy Baugh drops back into the end zone to throw. And as he throws, the ball hits the upright of the goalpost. The goalposts were at the front of the end zone back then. And the rule was if the ball hits the goalpost, it's a safety. So the first score of the game was a safety on the Redskins, 2-0 Rams, which reminded me of, I'm going to segue into, reminded me of that Seahawks Super Bowl against the Broncos, where the Seahawks started off with a 2-0.
That's right.
Missed the phone. And I always laugh at what some of the Super Bowl bets are, first score, coin toss, et cetera. And, I think the odds of a safety happening as the first score, whatever, 50,000 to 1. It's a tough one.
I can't remember. It might have been the first score of the Steelers-Vikings Super Bowl IX too. I can't remember.
Oh,
I know
really?
there was a safety in there. It might have been the first score then too. I think LC Greenwood recovered it or made a tackle on Tarkington, and
I love that.
Yeah, I have to look that up, but it might have been the first score.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, boy, those were the days. We were just talking about what your first Super Bowl experience was, which one you remember. Mine was Steelers Cowboys. And I can remember sitting there watching with my dad, and I was, 1978, and I had a lot of cards. So I had the cards of each player, on the team that I had sitting there. And, Bradshaw, and I'd go like, I've got that card. And midway through the game, my dad's like, I get it. You've got those cards. So let's just watch the game. Second score, Baugh, it said Baugh was taken out. He suffered bruised ribs and replaced by backup quarterback Frank Filchak, who I had no idea. It's one of those, like, who stood in for Terry Bradshaw when he was hurt? Oh. That's been lost to history unless you're a Steelers fan.
Yeah, Mike Krujek.
Yeah, it was no, I'm going back. No, that was too far back. I was going to say
when Cleveland Municipal Stadium, I was at that game when Bradshaw got dumped on his head by Turkey Jones, and it was a Super Bowl year. Mike Krujek came in and had the rest of the season, like 8 straight games, and Bradshaw comes back in the playoffs and they go to the Super Bowl. So yeah, Mike Krujek stepped in the Super 70s. Yeah.
That's why you got to have a little bit of depth at that position, especially back then when when you didn't have to gently let the quarterback down on a bed of pillows.
Right.
So Filchak comes in, throws a 38-yard strike to Steve Bogras, and again, somebody I hadn't heard of. Redskins take a 7-2 lead. Rams score before halftime. Rookie quarterback, UCLA sensation Bob Waterfield. I don't know why, but I am a huge Bob Waterfield fan. Maybe it's his 48 leaf card that I admire. There's a lot of these guys where I love their card. And you begin to know people's names, by card and what college they went to. But I'm a big Bob Waterfield fan. 37-yard touchdown pass to Jim Benton. Extra point was partially blocked, but it describes the ball teetering on the horizontal arm and then dropping over to the other side for the extra point. So 7 points scored. It was a 9-7 Rams lead at halftime. Third quarter, Rams increase their lead. Jim Gillette scores on a 44-yard touchdown reception from Bob Waterfield. Extra point missed. Redskins can come back to score on an 8-yard touchdown catch from backup quarterback Phil Chalk. And in the fourth quarter, the Redskins, so it's a 15-14 score going into the fourth quarter. Redskins drive twice and miss 2 field goals that would have won the game of 46 and a final one of 31 yards with a couple minutes in the game. Kind of a nail biter, 31-yard field goal, which is a chip shot in today's NFL. It's almost an extra point with the new rules.
Mm-hmm.
And to win the NFL championship, and it was missed.
It's amazing how the kicker's accuracy was back then, because everything was kicking with your toe. So you have a rounded shoe and you're kicking a round ball. You don't know which direction it's going to go, and it's unbelievable. Today we're used to people being hitting 90% of their kicks from anywhere, and back then if it was like a 50-50, sometimes you would say that. Oh yeah, he was 10 of 19 this year on extra points. And you're like, oh, what the hell? That sucks.
I can remember a football card of Tom Dempsey, the guy with a half a foot for the Saints, and
Hmm.
where he would just line up straight up, kick the ball just straight, not coming in from the angle, soccer style on the on the insole of your foot. But I just remember, yeah, Tom Dempsey, kicker. It's just so, yeah, you're right. It wasn't automatic. Extra points, none of it. It's at some point, I think it was Paul Brown who was like, we got to get better at this. We're starting to lose points. These are deciding games. So I
Yeah.
think he started specializing. I know like Ray Guy, was the first specialized punter. They drafted first round him. What are you doing, Al Davis? And suddenly he starts cranking out 80-yard, punts, and people are like, okay, we get it. So, yeah, very interesting. The I wanted to share a couple things that I found
Yeah, please
as I was
do.
looking. And by the way, the power of eBay, I ended up buying a 1945 Cleveland Rams championship T-shirt on eBay in my size, and
Oh,
because I love
nice.
wearing eclectic shirts, 1926 Pottsville Maroons, stuff like that. Miami Seahawks, which is an AAFC team. So, couple quick things I found. First was this ticket on eBay, which I thought was pretty interesting. $2,000, you can have
Ooh.
a seat, or a used ticket stub, and you can see some tape marks there. But I
Do you
thought
know
that,
what the price of the ticket was when back in the day to get to the game?
oh, yeah, I saw that it was written.
It's probably like $5 or
I
something
beg your,
ridiculous.
yeah, I think it was 550 or so, and then yeah, but it was said they lost money on the championship game because they had to rent a different stadium. They had to go to Cleveland Municipal and rent that. But yeah, I thought this was pretty interesting. I
Yeah.
love being able to find little pieces of history like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that is cool.
Next up was I'm gonna have to do these one at a time. I always tell Bob that we need a producer. This was a really cool little
Ooh.
photo that somebody colorized that I thought was really cool.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'm like,
almost like in 3D.
yeah, really cool. And there's the columns you were talking about,
Right.
at Cleveland Municipal. So I was like, this must have been a really a touchdown run or something. What's the significance of this place? I'm like, well, who's number 66 on the Rams? So I reverse engineered. It's Don Greenwood. He was a fullback. He played 9 games, for the Rams that season. And I'm like, well, how many stats? What were Don Greenwood number 66 stats? One run for 10 yards. So this is
That's his
Don
one run.
claimed fame. He had one run in the game. Somebody took a photo and decided to memorialize it by
Wow.
colorizing.
That's really cool. Look at, I mean, if you look in the middle of that, you can see like a pile of dirt, like right in front of where he's running the ball. You can see in the background. I
Oh
don't know if
yeah.
that's must have been. I know Cleveland Municipal, of course, they never had grass grow on the infield because the Indians played there too. But wonder if that was or maybe that's just some dirty snow or something.
Yeah.
Who
I
knows?
mean, it was really cold. Look at that. Yeah, you're right. Maybe some hay stacked up to throw down in the field, just in case. Yeah, who
Right.
knows? This was pretty interesting. A pretty cool book on the Cleveland Rams, which I'd never heard of. The Cleveland Rams, the NFL champs who left too soon, 36 to
Hmm.
45. So I mean, I've never heard of this author, but really cool book.
It is, yeah, that is neat. I've never heard of that one either.
Me neither. I figured you'd, kind of small circles in that.
But that it reminds me, do you know how the Cleveland Rams got their nickname, how they became the Rams?
I don't know.
Well, 1936, when they came in, one of the powerhouses of college football was the Fordham Rams. Because I was sitting there thinking, I'm like going, okay, they were the Rams originally in Cleveland. There's not any mountains. There's no Rams that live around Cleveland. It's the same area I live in. And but yeah, that's how they got because of the Fordham Rams' success. And
Huh.
Fordham's not even near Cleveland either, but it's just because they had just sort of like the Princeton Tigers. Every team was named the Tigers because of Princeton back in the day.
Oh, interesting. So a little bit of name recognition. And lastly, I couldn't find like the ticket stub. I couldn't find a program of the game, but what I found is a poster, facsimile of the game. 25 cents for a program, $5 for access, whatever.
They did graphics so much better back in the day than we do now. And that's really cool. I like that.
I could not agree more. They just don't make them like this anymore. Look at that. Just absolutely beautiful. So
a lot going on there. The city skyline in the background, the player in the forefront, the stadium. Yeah, very neat.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. It was just an absolutely beautiful program that I really enjoyed. So that was it. Those were my, like I said, talked into jumping on the Cleveland Rams, 1945 Cleveland Rams bandwagon. I bought a t-shirt. So somebody who makes t-shirts, thanks you for inviting me on the show.
Yeah.
Generating revenue.
Cool.
But
very cool.
As I mentioned, I thought it was very fascinating that Elroy, Hirsch, and Tom Fears, imagine how far they won the championship. They did it, but talk about a powerhouse draft choice. And when Tom Fears joined in 48, followed by Elroy Hirsch in 49, they won the championship as the LA Rams that year as well. So so just Bob Waterfield, future Hall of Famer, and added a couple future Hall of Famers. It was pretty good.
Yeah, well, even you think about just from 45 in Cleveland to 46 as the LA Rams, they added Norm Van Brocklin in the Hall of Fame because they had the dual quarterback system going on for a couple of years. And of course, Van Brocklin goes on and wins championships with the Eagles, and then we had also that year in 46. They had Kenny Washington and Willie Strode. They ended up re-breaking the racial barrier for the NFL, and there's some cool things. But the other amazing thing is, if you sit there and think about it, the city of Cleveland, they've really had some bad luck in the NFL and in our time. The modern time, the Super Bowl era. Just you have the drive and the fumble, and John Elway always seemed to get in the way. Or the Steelers or the Oilers or somebody would get in the way. Then they lose the franchise, and then the first year after they lose the franchise, the Baltimore Ravens go to the Super Bowl and win it. So this thing, and they have the whole LeBron James thing with him leaving and detriment. But I always tell people, Cleveland in essence won 4 professional football championships in a row. Between if you count Cleveland Rams winning in 45. 46 through 49, the Browns win the AAFC. And then in 50, the first year the Browns are in the NFL, they win the National Football League championship. That's pretty impressive. In 2 different leagues with 2 different franchises, 6 years in a row. Nobody's done that.
And that's why when, when Otto Graham has to be in that conversation of one of the best ever. I know we're getting a little off topic from the 45 championship, but that led into why they left. And it's interesting. It's a business. You think abysmal, attendance at a game and playing at a second-rate stadium. I don't know. I don't know what, I don't know what the seating at League Park was like, but I would imagine it's a very uncomfortable park bench in Cleveland in winter. And
I'm sure it is. It is.
Not pleasant. So,
yeah. Well, Joe, thank you for sharing that history with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit? Do you guys have any recent or upcoming episodes on Gridiron Greats that people could tune into?
If you go to like I mentioned, Bob's the publisher of Gridiron Greats magazine and the Gridiron Greats podcast. I'm a frequent writer for Gridiron Greats. Although I do owe Bob an article, I keep promising. I'm not a perfectionist by any means, but I like to make them tidy. And then the podcast, and he's such an amazing resource for the hobby. And like you, as we were talking before the show, these things we're doing are they're for the people coming behind us, and that's why I tip my hat to you putting your time in and doing these things. If you go to gridirongreats.com, there's a link there for the podcast, and you can go on there and you can hear me being Bob's faithful sidekick and making fun of his mustache.
And folks, I highly advise you to do it. I listen to it quite often. I've been a guest on the show. It's a great
Yeah,
show. It's a great way to see
yeah,
history through the collectibles and just the talk of the collectibles. You guys have some great shows and some great guests,
yeah.
and we
And
appreciate
different
you.
things. You do an amazing job memorializing, the game, the football history. Bob and I tend to talk a lot more about the collectibles, and so and auctions coming up, and et cetera. We try not to dive too much into the games unless it's a guest like who wrote a book, or Tim has been a guest on the show. You were saying he's a weekly spot on your show,
Yeah, we
which
have Tuesday Tim is what we call him. Tim Brown every Tuesday. So
I'm sure you love that.
footballarchaeology.com. Yeah. So great stuff. Well, Joe, we really appreciate you coming
Yeah.
on today and sharing your knowledge and doing some research on this team. And, we've learned a lot from it. And we really thank you for joining us during our championship series of 2025.
I really enjoyed diving down on that. Like I said, I learned, about these games, but when you dive down, I mean, you just learn something. You read a book on it, you have a guest on it, and I love diving down and learning a lot more about these, little things. It's just, so I really appreciate you inviting me on and helping me, guiding me towards this topic. Thank you very much, Darren.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.